When I heard my children say they were taking me to court for ruining their reputation, something inside me cracked, like glass under too much pressure. I sat there on the edge of that stiff courtroom chair, my hands trembling in my lap, and I wondered, how had it come to this? I remember that morning like it was yesterday, the way the sunlight streamed through the half-open blinds, dust motes dancing lazily in the golden light. I had made my usual breakfast, scrambled eggs, toast with a hint of butter, and coffee strong enough to wake the dead. It should have been ordinary, mundane, peaceful. But I had felt the tension in the air the night before, a subtle chill between us that I couldn't place. My children, my own flesh and blood, had smiled politely, but their eyes carried something I couldn't read. Something sharp. I had tried to dismiss it, tell myself I was imagining things. After all, they were grown. They were busy. Life happened. But deep down, I knew something had shifted. That nagging unease gnawed at me as I sipped my coffee, its bitterness oddly comforting. I am Margaret Ellis, though most people just call me Maggie. I'm 63 now, with curls that have begun to surrender to silver, but I still keep them long, letting them frame my face like a soft curtain. I've always believed in dignity, grace even in the smallest gestures. Folding laundry with care, brewing tea just right, listening with your whole heart. That's how I raised my children. That's how I lived. And somehow, that was about to be used against me. My oldest, Jason, was the first to notice the change in me, or perhaps the first to act on it. He's a lawyer by trade, sharp as a tack, with a voice that carries authority without effort. But that day, the authority felt pointed directly at me. The words, "We're filing a lawsuit," came out almost casually, like he was ordering takeout. I remember the way my heart stuttered, the way I clutched my apron like it was a lifeline. "Mom, it's not personal," he said, the practiced calm of a man used to control filling his tone. We can't let this go on anymore." I had stared at him, coffee cooling in my hand, the smell of burnt toast forgotten. "Go on. Jason, what are you talking about?" And then my daughter, Lila, chimed in, her voice soft but firm. "Mom, you've ruined our reputations. People are talking. It's embarrassing. Embarrassing." The word echoed in my mind. Me. The woman who raised you, who stayed up nights worrying when you were sick, who sacrificed so much, embarrassing. My throat tightened. I swallowed hard and looked at them. My beautiful children, who I had loved unconditionally. They were practically strangers in that moment, strangers with a verdict already passed in their minds. I remember pacing the kitchen after they left that morning, the tiles cold under my bare feet. The scent of burnt toast mingled with the faint aroma of my lavender soap from the sink. I pressed my hands to my temples and tried to breathe, tried to make sense of the world turning upside down. The silence of my house was deafening. The walls, usually warm and full of memories, felt like they were closing in. Every picture on the wall, the family at Disneyland, birthdays, graduations, seemed to stare at me accusingly. I wanted to cry, but my tears were spent long ago on worries, on sleepless nights, on the little heartbreaks that never got a name. I called my best friend, Ruth, and we talked for hours. She didn't have answers. No one did. But she reminded me who I was, who I had always been. "Maggie," she said softly, "sometimes the people we love most can hurt us the deepest. But the truth, it has a way of showing itself." I tried to hold on to that thought as I walked through my home. My living room was quiet, the sunlight casting long shadows across the worn carpet. I paused by the mantel and touched the photograph of my husband, Robert. He had passed away 5 years ago, and I still missed the way he'd make a room feel lighter just by walking in. "Robert," I whispered, my voice trembling, "I don't know how I got here. I don't understand why they would do this." That was the day I realized the fight wasn't just about what they accused me of. It was about what they had hidden. I didn't know the full story yet, but something deep in my bones told me there was more beneath their polished words, their carefully rehearsed complaints. And that fear, the fear of the unknown, was heavier than any courtroom gavel. The following weeks were a blur of legal notices, whispered phone calls, and restless nights. I spent hours poring over papers, trying to find some clue, some hint, some mistake that might explain the sudden animosity. The house that once smelled of fresh cookies and brewed coffee now smelled faintly of paper and despair. My own home had turned against me in a way I could never have imagined. And yet, despite the heaviness, there was a small spark. A quiet, stubborn ember of resolve. I had raised these children with love, yes, but I also raised them with the understanding that truth matters. And if they thought they could hide their secrets behind a lawsuit, I was about to learn just how much courage I still had left. The courtroom door loomed ahead now, and with each step my heart beat faster. Not out of fear, but anticipation. The truth, whatever it was, would be revealed. And I had a feeling that when it came out, it would shake more than just my family. It would shake the very foundation of everything I thought I knew about them, and about myself. Before all this chaos began, my life had a rhythm, a comforting, ordinary rhythm that I never thought would feel so fragile. Mornings were mine. The hum of the coffee maker, the soft creak of my favorite rocking chair by the window, and the smell of oatmeal simmering on the stove. I liked small routines. They reminded me that the world still made sense, even when it didn't. My children, Jason, Lila, and my youngest little Ethan, were grown with lives full of ambition, jobs, and social circles I barely understood. I had tried to keep close to them without smothering, offering advice only when asked, and always being there when needed. I wasn't perfect. Who is? But I had loved them fiercely, with patience and hope and the quiet kind of pride that doesn't demand recognition. Jason had always been the responsible one, the type to straighten the picture frames before anyone noticed they were crooked. I remember when he passed the bar exam. He had been shaking so much that he could barely hold the letter, but when he saw I was watching, he smiled like a proud child again. Lila was the creative soul, the one who painted her thoughts onto canvas, always humming, always dreaming, and full of warmth. Ethan, my sweet Ethan, still with that gentle, almost shy laugh, had a heart so open it was sometimes maddening. We had our little Sunday traditions. Pancakes for breakfast, church in the morning, and then a walk in the park while I pretended not to notice Jason checking his phone every 2 seconds. Those walks were my favorite. The smell of fresh-cut grass, the wind brushing against my cheeks, the sound of laughter drifting from kids playing in the distance. It all felt like proof that life was simple and right. But even in the midst of those ordinary days, small things began to nag at me. Little slips, odd comments, fleeting expressions that didn't match the words being spoken. Lila once laughed a little too quickly when I mentioned her new co-worker. Jason would glance away whenever I asked about his business partner. And Ethan. Sometimes he hesitated before telling me about his day, as if weighing how much to reveal. I tried to ignore it. I told myself I was reading too much into it. I had always been a worrier, prone to imagining the worst. Still, intuition is a stubborn companion, and mine was whispering that something beneath the surface was shifting. The first real clue came during a Friday evening dinner at my house. I had roasted a chicken, mashed potatoes, and my signature green beans, seasoned just right. We sat at the table, sunlight fading into soft evening glow, and I noticed the tension immediately. Jason was unusually quiet, picking at his food. Lila's hands fiddled with her napkin, twisting it into knots. Ethan barely touched his plate. I tried to keep the conversation light. "So, how was the presentation today?" I asked Jason, hoping to find normalcy. "It was fine," he said, but his voice was clipped tense. He avoided my eyes entirely. "Fine." I pressed gently. "That's not like you. Tell me more." He shrugged, a defensive motion. "Nothing to tell, Mom. It went fine." I felt a pang, a tiny spark of unease. Something in his tone was off. Not just defensive, but guarded, like he was protecting a secret. Lila laughed nervously at something on her phone, but it was hollow. Ethan, my sweet boy, finally met my eyes, and there was a flicker of something, guilt maybe? Or fear? I couldn't tell. After dinner, I cleaned up while they all lingered in the living room, pretending to scroll through their phones. I remember the quiet, heavy, almost suffocating silence, broken only by the ticking of the old clock on the wall. I placed the last plate in the dishwasher, leaned on the counter, and whispered to myself, "Something isn't right here. Something is hidden." The next weeks confirmed it. Small signs kept appearing. Hushed phone calls ending abruptly when I entered the room, sudden trips they never mentioned, and an air of secrecy that grew heavier each day. I began keeping a journal, not for anyone else, but for myself, a record of the subtle shifts in their behavior. Sometimes I'd write down a word, a phrase, a look, and reread it later, hoping patterns would emerge. And slowly, inevitably they did. I noticed the way they looked at me, not with the open, loving eyes of their childhood, but with caution. Like I had become a threat, someone they had to carefully navigate. My heart ached, because I couldn't understand why. I had always tried to give them strength, protection, and guidance. And yet, here I was watching the distance grow, powerless to stop it. One evening, I caught Jason muttering to Lila in hushed tones in the hallway. The words were fragmented, but I heard enough. "Mom, can't ruin everything court." My stomach dropped. I froze in the doorway, my breath catching in my throat. Could it really be true? Were my children planning to take me to court? And if so, why? I confronted them gently that night, sitting at the edge of my bed, feeling the softness of the quilt beneath my hands. "Jason, Lila, Ethan, can we talk? Honestly." My voice trembled, but I tried to keep calm. Jason avoided my gaze. Lila fidgeted. Ethan looked down. And then, in unison, they said it. "We need to protect ourselves. You've ruined us." The words hit me like a physical blow. I sank back against the headboard, stunned. My children, my precious children, were telling me that I had harmed them in ways I didn't even understand. The room spun, the air heavy, and the quiet hum of the ceiling fan felt deafening. It was then I realized this was more than a simple misunderstanding. Something deeper, darker, had been hidden from me for years. And if the truth ever came out, it would change everything. The quiet resolve that had always lived inside me stirred. I didn't yet know the full story, but I knew this. I would not let the shadows of their secrets dictate my life. Something had to give. The days that followed were strange, like walking through a familiar house that had suddenly been rearranged while I slept. I could feel the distance between us stretching, silent but palpable, like a low fog creeping through a room. And though my children spoke to me, smiled at me, even hugged me on occasion, there was an undercurrent I couldn't ignore. Something that tasted bitter beneath the sweetness. I began noticing small inconsistencies. Jason would mention a meeting in the city, but later I'd see his car still in the driveway. Lila claimed she'd stayed late at work, but a neighbor mentioned seeing her strolling in the park with a man I didn't know. Ethan became even quieter, avoiding phone calls I tried to make, disappearing for hours with excuses that didn't quite sit right. I tried to dismiss it, tried to tell myself I was reading shadows in sunlight. But mothers have intuition. They've had to for generations. And mine was screaming. One Sunday morning, I found myself in the kitchen, arms crossed, staring at the counter as sunlight glinted off my coffee mug. Lila appeared behind me, leaning casually against the doorframe, her hair catching the light. She had that smile, the one I always loved, but her eyes were cautious, guarded. "Mom," she said softly, "you've been noticing things, haven't you?" I froze. My heart thumped painfully against my chest. "What things, Lila?" My voice was steadier than I felt. "The little inconsistencies. The odd trips, the sudden disappearances. You've been paying attention." Her voice was almost a whisper, but it cut through me like a knife. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to remain calm. "I notice patterns, sweetheart. Patterns tell a story." She looked away, biting her lip. There was a hesitation, a tension, a pause pregnant with meaning. And then she said something that made my stomach twist. "Mom, some things, maybe you shouldn't know yet. It might hurt too much." Hurt too much. Those words echoed long after she left the kitchen. What could they possibly be hiding that would be so devastating? I tried to let it go, tried to continue the day as normal, but my mind refused. Every time I glanced at them, I felt a flicker of fear, a knot of suspicion tightening in my chest. Over the next few days, I started paying closer attention. Small things, subtle patterns, tiny slips that no one else might notice. Jason always seemed to be checking his phone when I entered the room, quickly locking the screen when I approached. Lila had a new email account she didn't mention. And Ethan, my sweet boy, who had always trusted me, now flinched whenever I raised my voice even slightly. I remember one evening in particular. I had been baking bread, the smell of yeast filling the kitchen, when Jason came in. I looked up and caught him stuffing a stack of papers under the sofa cushion. I cleared my throat. "What's that?" I asked, trying to keep my tone casual. He hesitated, then straightened, brushing crumbs from his hands. "Nothing, Mom. Just some old receipts." But I knew better. I could see it in his eyes. The flash of panic, the quick avoidance of my gaze. Something was being hidden, and he knew I was starting to see it. That night, I sat at the edge of my bed, the scent of fresh bread mingling with the faint lavender from my pillow. I thought about all the signs, all the subtle hints, and for the first time, fear truly gripped me. This wasn't just about a lawsuit anymore. This was about secrets long buried and dangerous. I began to retrace the last few years in my mind, piecing together moments that had once seemed insignificant. There was the time Jason refused to let me meet a colleague at a company event. Lila had avoided inviting me to her birthday dinner for reasons she never explained. Ethan had started staying out late, always with a vague excuse. Now these moments felt like puzzle pieces snapping into place, a picture I hadn't been ready to see. One afternoon, I decided to confront them indirectly. I pulled out a photo album, the kind with thick pages and plastic sleeves, and placed it on the coffee table. "Children," I said casually, "look at these pictures. Tell me what you remember." They glanced at each other, hesitant, unsure. As I flipped through the pages, pausing at each photo, I noticed how their smiles changed, how Jason's hand twitched, how Lila's shoulders stiffened, how Ethan's gaze dropped. It was a subtle thing, almost imperceptible, but to me it screamed truth. There was something in those photos they didn't want me to see or remember. Something hidden in the past that had been quietly shaping our lives without my knowledge. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, listening to the distant hum of traffic outside, the occasional creak of the old house settling, my mind racing. I didn't yet know what they were hiding, but I knew this much. The day it came out, everything would change. And I knew deep in my heart that I had to be ready. Ready not just to hear it, but to act, to stand firm in the truth, even if it meant standing against my own children. The suspicion had taken root, but I refused to let it consume me. I had to gather evidence, observe quietly, and wait for the moment when the truth would reveal itself. Because whatever they were hiding, it was going to be a shock, and I needed to be prepared for it, not just for my sake, but for theirs too. The quiet tension in our home was now constant, a slow-burning ember that refused to die. And while they tried to keep up appearances, I was watching, listening, remembering, waiting. I didn't know exactly when the discovery would happen, but I could feel it in my bones. The moment was coming, and when it did, nothing would ever be the same. The discovery came one rainy afternoon, the kind of rain that makes the world feel smaller, intimate, and suffocating at once. I had been tidying the study, an old, sunlit room lined with bookshelves and memories, when I noticed Jason's briefcase left carelessly on the floor, slightly ajar. Normally, I would have ignored it. I believed in privacy. But that day, something inside me told me to look. Inside were papers, letters, emails printed out, financial statements. I hesitated, hands hovering above the stack, heart hammering. Mothers have instincts, yes, but they also have limits. My hand trembled as I picked up the top letter. My eyes scanned the words, and suddenly the room seemed to tilt. It was about them, my children, and the secrets they had buried for years. Secrets that had shaped their lives, their actions, and now, their accusations against me. Jason had been hiding debts, substantial ones. Not just financial, but legal problems he had never mentioned. Lila had been lying about her employment and income, covering up something that could have cost her reputation and career. Ethan's sweet, trusting Ethan had been involved in a minor incident years ago, something he had confessed to no one, fearing punishment. And all along they had believed I would judge them, scold them, or, God forbid, tell anyone. I sank into the chair beside the desk, the rain hammering against the windows, the smell of wet pavement seeping in. I couldn't breathe at first. Shock, disbelief, heartbreak. It all mingled together into a storm that left me numb. How could they hide so much from me? How could they plan to take me to court when they themselves carried secrets that could destroy the very reputations they claimed I ruined? I heard the front door creak open, Jason's footsteps on the hardwood floor. He was early from work, or maybe he had come home to check on the papers. I didn't move. My hands clutched the letter as if it were a lifeline. "Mom." His voice was cautious, hesitant. He stopped in the doorway, scanning the room. "What are you doing in here?" I looked up, meeting his eyes for the first time that day. My voice was calm, but my hands shook. "Jason, I think it's time we talked. Really talked." He swallowed, stepping closer. "Mom, I held up the papers. These, Jason. All of this. Why didn't you tell me? You know I've never judged you unfairly. You know I would have helped." He looked away, guilt flashing across his face, but he remained silent. Lila appeared then, drawn by the voices, her brow furrowed, hands twisting nervously. Ethan followed, hesitant, silent, as if stepping into a trap he couldn't yet understand. I set the papers on the table, letting the evidence speak. These secrets, the debts, the lies, the incidents you hid. You've carried them alone, believing it was better than facing me. And now, you're dragging me to court, accusing me of ruining your reputation. The room was heavy with silence. Rain tapped against the windows, a steady, relentless rhythm. I could see the shame in their faces, the weight of their own guilt pressing down. And yet they had to hear the truth from me in this moment. You have hidden things, I continued, voice calm but firm. Things that could have destroyed you, yes, but also things that prove how human you are. How flawed, how scared. And instead of letting me help, instead of trusting the mother who raised you, you turned that fear into an attack against me. I saw tears in Lila's eyes. Ethan's hands shook as he reached for a chair. Jason swallowed, finally meeting my gaze. Mom, you thought I would judge you? You thought I would destroy you? My voice cracked slightly, though I held my composure. You are my children. I raised you, loved you, protected you. And yet you believe that your secrets give you the right to accuse me falsely. They were silent. The weight of their own deception pressed in, suffocating them. And in that silence, I realized something profound. The betrayal was not just theirs. It was mutual. We had failed to communicate, to trust, to bridge the growing gap between us. But it could still be mended if truth was finally acknowledged. Jason finally spoke, his voice small, vulnerable. Mom, we were scared. We thought if you knew, it would. Would what? I asked gently. Hurt me? Shame me? Shame is not mine to give. I am here to guide, to help, to support. Not to tear down. I paused, letting the words sink in. Rain streaked the window pane, and for a moment, I could see the reflection of all four of us together, my children and me, faces etched with fear, guilt, and love tangled in the same messy knot. I'm not the enemy here, I whispered. The truth is never the enemy. Hiding it, that's what becomes dangerous. For the first time, I saw a spark of recognition in their eyes, a flicker of shame, yes, but also of relief. They had feared my judgment for years. But now, faced with the calm, unwavering presence of a mother who had only ever wanted the best for them, they began to unravel. And just like that, the betrayal transformed. What could have been the destruction of our family became a moment of revelation, a chance to rebuild, a chance for honesty. The rain slowed outside, leaving a faint smell of wet earth and renewal. And in that study, amid papers and confessions, I realized something crucial. Sometimes the ones we fear most, the ones we love the most, are the ones hiding the deepest truths. And sometimes the only way to heal is to face those truths head-on, without anger, without judgment, and with the calm knowledge that love, even when tested, is stronger than secrets. After the discovery, the house felt different. Heavier, yes, but also more alive. The air seemed charged with possibility, like the moment before a storm breaks, the calm that signals a release is coming. I spent the next few days carefully considering my next steps. I wasn't angry, not really, but I was determined. I needed to act wisely, not out of spite, but out of principle. First, I had to protect myself. I contacted my lawyer, explaining the situation calmly, carefully. I didn't want to escalate. I wanted truth, transparency, and if necessary, justice. My lawyer's eyes widened slightly when I mentioned the papers I had found. Margaret, he said, you're in a strong position, but you need to stay composed. Don't react emotionally in court. I nodded. Composure had always been my strongest armor. I reminded myself of that as I organized the evidence. The letters, financial documents, emails, and other proof of the secrets they had tried to hide. Every paper was a piece of the puzzle, every detail a thread I could pull to reveal the bigger picture. But this wasn't just about court. It was about confronting my children, helping them see the consequences of their actions. I didn't want to humiliate them. I wanted them to understand that hiding truth, even from the ones who love us most, always has a cost. One evening, I gathered them in the living room, the air thick with tension. I had lit candles, their soft glow filling the room with warmth. We need to talk, I said. My voice was calm but unwavering. Jason looked at me, jaw tight. Lila's hands twisted in her lap. Ethan sat quietly, avoiding my eyes. I could feel the weight of their guilt pressing down, and I let the silence sit for a moment, letting them absorb the gravity of the situation. I've gone through the papers, I continued. I know the truth. I know what has been hidden, and I know what you were planning. I paused, letting the words sink in. You wanted to take me to court, to accuse me falsely. But you were hiding things that could have ruined your lives, and yet you carried them alone. Jason finally spoke, voice low. Mom, we didn't know how to tell you. You thought I would judge you? Shame you? Punish you? I interrupted gently. I am not your enemy. But by hiding these things, by turning fear into accusations, you've hurt all of us. And now we have a choice. We can continue down this path, or we can face the truth together. Their eyes met mine, uncertainty and fear mirrored in each one. I reached out, touching Jason's hand first. I'm not here to destroy you. I'm here to guide you back, to help you make it right. We spent hours talking, unraveling years of misunderstandings, lies, and fear. It wasn't easy. There were tears, raised voices, confessions that shook the very foundation of our trust. But in the middle of that storm, something remarkable happened. Honesty began to replace fear. Vulnerability began to replace anger. The next step was practical. The legal battle had to be addressed, but I approached it with strategy, not malice. I contacted the court, providing the documentation that proved the truth. I didn't want revenge. I wanted clarity. I wanted justice, yes, but also the opportunity for my children to face the consequences of their actions responsibly, without destroying our family in the process. The following weeks were tense. Court dates were scheduled. My children were silent, unsure, weighed down by the gravity of the truth finally surfacing. And I felt a strange mix of fear and determination. Fear of what they might do, but determination to act with integrity, to show them that the right path, though difficult, is always possible. One day, I overheard Jason talking to his attorney, his voice laced with worry. We didn't expect this. Mom found everything. I smiled quietly to myself. He didn't understand the depth of my calm. I wasn't there to destroy them. I was there to reveal the truth, to shine a light so bright that there was no hiding. Lila approached me later, eyes red from crying. Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't know it would come to this. I was scared. I pulled her into a hug, feeling the tremor in her body, the release of years of tension. I know, sweetheart, but hiding never helps. Truth always finds its way out, one way or another. The question is, do we face it together or let it destroy us? Even Ethan, who had been the quietest, admitted his fear. I didn't want to lose you, Mom, or ruin everything. You've been hiding from yourselves too, I said softly. The first step is admitting the truth. That's the only way we move forward. By the time court day arrived, I was prepared. I didn't enter with anger or bitterness or resentment. I entered with calm resolve, with the certainty that the truth, unvarnished, undeniable, would speak for itself. My children were present, nervous, guilty, unsure how to respond. And that was okay. They needed to feel the weight of what they had done, but also the possibility of redemption. When the judge asked for our statements, I remained calm, deliberate, measured. I recounted the events, presented the evidence, and, without raising my voice or resorting to theatrics, laid bare the truth of what had been hidden for years. The courtroom was silent, save for the faint ticking of the clock and the occasional shuffling of papers. My children watched, wide-eyed, as the reality unfolded before them. And I realized in that moment that sometimes the most powerful action isn't revenge. It isn't anger. It is the quiet, unwavering revelation of truth. And when it is done with love, even the deepest betrayals can be transformed into lessons. Lessons that endure far longer than grudges ever could. The storm of betrayal had been met with calm action, honesty, and unwavering moral strength. But the story was not over. The public consequences, the exposure of hidden secrets, the acknowledgement of responsibility, were still to come. And I knew that how my children responded would shape the rest of our lives. The courtroom that day was heavy with anticipation, though I carried a quiet calm. My children sat on the bench beside me, eyes downcast, fingers fidgeting with the edges of their notebooks. The judge, a stern woman with a voice that could command silence in a hurricane, peered at us over the top of her glasses. When I began to speak, the courtroom fell into a hush that seemed almost sacred. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I spoke in measured, deliberate tones, recounting not just the accusations they had leveled against me, but the evidence I had uncovered, letters, emails, receipts, everything. Your Honor, I said, holding a folder carefully in my hands, these documents reveal a truth my children have hidden for years. They have faced challenges, made mistakes, and yes, there have been consequences. But they are my children, and I have always tried to protect and guide them. The judge's eyes widened slightly as I laid out the documents one by one. Even the lawyers, seasoned in courtroom drama, leaned forward, murmuring to each other in astonishment. The room was quiet but electric, every ear straining to hear the truth of years hidden in silence. When I finished, the silence stretched. My children looked at me then, finally seeing the unwavering resolve, the love that had guided me through this ordeal. The weight of the lies and secrets they had carried pressed down, and I could see their own shock mirrored in the eyes of the people seated around us. Friends, neighbors, and even distant relatives who had come, curious about the case. Then the judge spoke. Her voice, steady but trembling slightly, broke the tension. "Margaret Ellis," she began, "the evidence you have presented is compelling. It is clear that the accusations against you are not only unfounded, but the individuals involved have withheld significant information from this court for years. I am without words." Her pause was long, filled with the weight of the truth laid bare. She adjusted her glasses, shuffled papers, then looked directly at my children. "To those who sought to defame their mother," she continued, "you have created a situation that could have been avoided had honesty prevailed. The court notes the courage of Margaret Ellis in presenting the truth clearly, calmly, and with dignity. This court cannot condone such actions, and the matter is resolved accordingly." The words hung in the air like a heavy rain. Relief, shock, and humility washed over my children. Jason's shoulders slumped, Lila's eyes glistened, and Ethan's lips trembled. They had been forced to confront not only me, but their own decisions. Outside the courtroom, the ripple effects were immediate. Friends and neighbors whispered, not with malice, but with astonishment. People who had once believed the rumors now looked at my children with new eyes, understanding the consequences of secrecy and deception. My children faced moral, social, and emotional accountability. They had to answer to more than just a judge. They had to answer to a community that had been misled by incomplete truths. I stayed close to them, gently placing my hands on their shoulders. "This isn't the end," I said quietly. "It's a beginning. You've faced your mistakes, and now you have a chance to rebuild, honestly, openly, with integrity. That's how trust is restored." They nodded, tears flowing freely now, but not in shame alone. There was relief too, a sense of unburdening, a realization that hiding truth only compounds pain. In that moment, I understood something essential. The most powerful consequences aren't punishment, but awakening. In the days that followed, the story spread quietly through our community. Some were shocked, some sympathetic, but all understood that truth, no matter how delayed, had a way of surfacing. My children reached out personally to friends, colleagues, and acquaintances they had misled or left in the dark. Apologies were made, explanations given, and slowly dignity was restored. Not just to me, but to them as well. And through it all, I watched them change. Not instantly, but gradually. Jason learned humility, realizing that control doesn't equal wisdom. Lila embraced accountability, understanding that creativity and honesty must walk hand in hand. Ethan, my gentle, kind-hearted Ethan, learned that courage isn't just about facing the world. It's about facing yourself. The public consequences, though uncomfortable, were ultimately transformative. Secrets were exposed. Misunderstandings were cleared. And the family, once fractured by fear and misjudgment, began the slow work of rebuilding on a foundation of truth. I often reflect on that period now. The courtroom, the papers, the quiet conversations afterward. All of it taught me something invaluable. That consequences are not just punishments. They are mirrors, revealing the reality of our actions and offering a chance to learn, grow, and heal. The truth had been revealed. The court had acknowledged it. And more importantly, my children had been forced to face themselves. And in that, they found the first steps toward real maturity and accountability. After the courtroom storm had passed, the house felt quieter, but in a way that was gentle, almost tender. The tension that had gripped us for months had begun to lift, leaving space for something I had feared was lost forever. Understanding. My children were different now, not just in demeanor, but in how they approached life and me. Jason still carried the weight of responsibility, but it was tempered with humility. Lila's laughter, once slightly forced in our home, now had warmth and authenticity again. And Ethan's gentle heart shone brighter than ever, no longer shadowed by fear or secrecy. We started small. Sunday dinners returned, but with a new rhythm. Conversations without pretense, questions answered honestly, moments of silence shared comfortably rather than tensely. I noticed the smell of fresh-baked bread again, the faint aroma of roasted vegetables, the hum of the ceiling fan, ordinary details that now felt miraculous. One evening, as we gathered around the table, Jason reached across and squeezed my hand. "Mom, thank you. For everything. Even when we didn't deserve it." His voice was low, sincere. I smiled, feeling the tremor of emotion in my chest. "I didn't do it for thanks, Jason. I did it because that's what love requires. Patience, guidance, and sometimes courage. Courage to face the truth, even when it hurts." Lila added softly, "I never realized how much hiding things could hurt not just us, but you too." "I'm sorry, Mom." And Ethan, looking at the flickering candlelight, whispered, "I'm scared sometimes, but I want to be honest from now on. I want to trust myself and you." I felt my heart swell. This was the healing I had hoped for. The moment when fear gave way to trust, when walls built from secrecy crumbled to reveal love still standing underneath. We also began to take small steps in repairing relationships beyond our home. My children reached out to friends, colleagues, even distant relatives, owning up to past mistakes, explaining miscommunications, and offering apologies. Each act of honesty, each vulnerable conversation, built a bridge back to the world they had hidden from, and in doing so, they learned something profound. Accountability is not shame, but a pathway to respect and dignity. I too had to heal. I spent evenings reflecting, sometimes alone, sometimes with my friends. I took walks in the park, noticing the smell of damp grass, the crisp chill in the air, and the way the light hit the trees just so. I reminded myself that life, in all its complexity, is a series of choices, and that sometimes even those we love most will falter. But love, patience, and truth can help guide them back. The courtroom experience remained a shadow, yes, but it was no longer a threat. It had become a teacher. It taught us about trust, about vulnerability, about the strength it takes to admit mistakes and to forgive. And it taught us that families, no matter how fractured, have the capacity to heal if truth is faced with courage. One quiet afternoon, Jason came to me while I was watering my little garden. The smell of wet soil and budding flowers filled the air. He knelt beside me, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Mom, I want to start fresh. No secrets, no hiding. Can we do that?" I touched his hand gently, feeling the warmth of redemption in that gesture. "Yes, Jason, that's exactly what we'll do. Fresh starts are possible, but only if we nurture them, like these plants, with care and honesty." Lila joined us, brushing soil from her hands. "I feel like a weight has been lifted," she said softly. "It's strange, but good." Even Ethan, shy and tentative at first, added, I think we can be better. Not perfect, but better." I looked at them, the three of them, and felt a deep, unshakable pride. Not pride in perfection, but pride in growth. Pride in courage. Pride in the ability to face oneself, face the truth, and choose integrity over deception. We weren't perfect. We never would be. But we were healing, learning, and moving forward. And in that, I found the peace I had been searching for all along. Sometimes, I would sit in my living room, a cup of tea in hand, listening to the quiet hum of the house. I would watch my children laugh, hear them argue playfully over minor disagreements, and know that the bonds we almost lost had been strengthened through honesty, courage, and love. And I would whisper to myself softly like a prayer, "We survived. We are still here. And we are stronger than our secrets." Sometimes the hardest battles aren't fought in courts or boardrooms. They're fought in living rooms, at kitchen tables, in the quiet corners of our hearts. I learned that the truth, no matter how painful or long hidden, has a way of finding its voice. And when it does, it doesn't just reveal what's been kept in the shadows. It shows us what matters most: love, trust, and courage. I won't pretend the journey was easy. It took patience, heartbreak, and a willingness to stand firm even when I was afraid. But standing firm in truth allowed not only justice, but healing. My children and I faced our mistakes together, and in that shared honesty, we discovered something stronger than fear. The bond of family, resilient and real. So I leave you with this thought, dear friends. Sometimes the people we love the most can hurt us, intentionally or not. But they are also the ones who, with guidance and honesty, can learn, grow, and rebuild. Courage isn't just about confrontation. It's about compassion, patience, and the bravery to face the truth, no matter how uncomfortable. Would you have had the courage to reveal the truth, even if it meant shaking the foundations of your own family? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Share your story, your lessons, your reflections. And if my story touched you, subscribe and stay with me, because every family has a story worth telling.